Who are we looking for?
Becker.
Absent.
Absent. Buck. Present. Buckner. Conti. Corum. Court. Del Grosso. Dorr. Oh, wait. Excused. Duran. Everett. Representative Everett. Absent. Exum. Fields. Fisher. Foote. Garcia. Gardner.
Absent.
Absent. Giroux. Janal. Hamner. Representative Gardner is present. Representative Hamner. Absent. Holbert is excused. Yeah. Hollinghorst. Excused. Humphrey. Joshi. Kagan. Kraft-Tharp. Labuda. Landgraf. Lawrence. Lebsock. Lee. May. McCann. McLaughlin.
Here.
McNulty.
Absent.
Absent. Melton. Mitch Bush. Moreno is excused. Murray. Representative Murray? Oh, excused. Navarro. Nordberg. Pavone. Peniston. Pedersen. Primavera. Priola. Absent. Rankin. Rosenthal. Ryden. Sane. Salazar. Schaefer. Scott. Who did you say this was? Oh, she was already here. Singer excused. Sonnenberg. Stevens is excused. Swam. Representative Swam. Absent. Zabo. Tyler. Representative Hamner and Murray are present. Representative Tyler. Representative Singer is present. Rep. Tyler absent. Vigil. Waller. Williams. Representative Williams present. Wilson. I'll get you. Wright. Representative Swam is present. Young. Speaker Ferrandino.
Representative, oh, sorry.
I've got 55, 5, and 5.
With 55 members present, 5 excused and 5 absent, a quorum is present. Representative Primavera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that the reading of the Journal of Monday, February 10th, 2014 be dispensed with and that it be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No. Representative Primavera wins. The motion is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Representative Primavera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have one more announcement. You'll notice on your desks this morning you received this flyer The Colorado Health Institute is releasing a new analysis of primary care capacity across Colorado, and you're invited to see the results. This is especially important in rural districts, so if you're a rural legislator, you may want to go. It's today from 4 to 5 in Senate Room 356. Thank you.
Further announcement. Representative Labuda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as I told you, I'm reminding you every day that this Friday is Valentine's Day, and if you get here at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can go down to House Committee Room 109 for a Valentine's party to welcome our 2 new women legislators this year, and one of them is our own Representative Casey Becker. So if you haven't met her yet, come then. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Becker. Speaking of Representative Becker.
Members, you will notice a yellow ball on your desks. Those are actually called grapefruit, and they're from my home state of Florida, courtesy of my dad who grew these, so please enjoy them. They were shipped during a very cold week, so I hope they didn't freeze en route, but enjoy the fruit.
Thank you, Representative Becker. Representative Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This afternoon, House Judiciary Committee, we were scheduled to hear Representative Priola's bill. That has been laid over. The only bill to be heard this afternoon at 1:30 in the old Supreme Court chamber is Humphrey, Policies Allowing Concealed Carry in Public Schools. That bill will go forward at 1:30 p.m. this afternoon, Supreme Court.
Representative Hamner and McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Representative Hamner and I are both privileged to encompass the Western State Colorado University, and therefore we wanted to invite you to the Board of Trustees. We're having a special coffee with Interim President Brad Baca for a legislative coffee reception.
We hope to see you there Thursday morning,
Hamner.
7:30 a.m. in Senate Committee Room 354. Thanks so much.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources Committee, as well as all the other members of this body, please be aware that tomorrow morning at 7:30 there will be a presentation by the Colorado Water Conservation Board discussing the state water plan, the Colorado Water Plan, which is under development right now. And also there will be a presentation about the Colorado River Compact. So that's at 7:30 tomorrow morning, and even if you're not a member of the Ag Committee, you're welcome to come down and participate, because we'll be discussing one of the most important issues in Colorado, and that's our water resources. Thanks.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Business, Labor, Economic, Workforce Development Committee. We will meet today at 1:30. We have 2 bills. House Bill 141125 and House Bill 141183. See you at 1:30.
Further announcements or introductions? Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to welcome and introduce students over here to my right from Campo, Colorado, from Undivided High School. And Superintendent Johnson's somewhere with them over there. So they are just 8 miles north of the Oklahoma border. They've come quite a ways to visit us. I'd like to give them a little welcome from the State House here.
Members, can we have your attention at the well for a sad tribute? Representative Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I'm very sorry to announce that we have lost a dedicated public servant, husband and father, Sergeant Baldwin, age 51, a Jefferson County Deputy Sheriff. I would invite all Jefferson County and Boulder representatives to come to the well with me to recognize the loss of Sergeant Baldwin. Sergeant Baldwin Sergeant Baldwin was killed in the line of duty on Sunday, January 26, after being struck on his motorcycle by a wrong-way driver on Highway 93 between Golden and Boulder. Sergeant Baldwin was a military veteran in the United States Air Force, as well as a highly decorated 27-year veteran of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. Sergeant Baldwin began his law enforcement career with the Sheriff's Office in 1987. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant in 1996 and worked varying assignments in the Detentions Division, Civil and Fugitive Unit, Bomb Squad, Patrol Division, and most recently in the Traffic Motorcycle Unit. Sergeant Baldwin's passion for teaching was also evident, serving as a firearms instructor, a driving instructor, and an instructor for the basic and advanced law enforcement motorcycle school. Sergeant Baldwin's selfless commitment to the agency was unparalleled, but he was so much more than that. He was everyone's friend, mentor, and active community partner in Jefferson County. His career was filled with commendations, both as a patrol supervisor and a motorcycle officer. His most recent service during the devastating Colorado floods earned him the prestigious Sheriff's Star. Memorial services for Sergeant Baldwin were held Monday, February 3rd in Broomfield. The United States Honor Flag was flown into Denver International Airport to be used for Sergeant Baldwin's memorial. This United States Honor Flag is considered a national treasure and is always entrusted to a law enforcement guardian. It has flown at the 911 site in New York City and has traveled millions of miles honoring fallen law enforcement officers. When it arrived at DIA, an airline official announced to all passengers in the terminal to please stand in respect of the honor flag as it was transferred to Sergeant Jim Parr, receiving it on behalf of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. Sergeant Baldwin's wife, Crystal, said that her husband was honored to serve others and to help empower and improve fellow officers and all Colorado citizens. Sadly, this tragic accident leaves behind Sergeant Baldwin's wife, Crystal, and his son, Josh, age 29, and all the citizens of Jefferson County and all of Colorado. Members, a memorial fund for his family has been established and may be accessed through any key bank. Mr. Speaker, could we observe a moment of silence to recognize Sergeant David Baldwin?
The House will observe a moment of silence. Thank you, Representative Schaefer. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we do stand in solidarity with all our law enforcement officers. I have the Colorado flag and a tribute to present to Jefferson County Sheriff Ted Mink, Under Sheriff Pat Fleer, and Division Chief Dan Fleer. So, Sheriff Mink and Sheriff Ray Fleer, Division Chief Fleer, would you please come forward to accept this flag in honor of Sergeant Baldwin?
Representative Schaefer, can you bring it to them? Is it not
Okay.
allowed in the well?
Okay, we will do it on the sides. Anyway, would you please accept, you will accept this honor flag and tribute, I'm sure, on behalf of the House of Representatives. Thank you. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Representative Schaefer. Members, we will now proceed to our next order of business. Third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill. Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sorry to hold up things, but can we as a House show our appreciation?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Representative Sonnenberg. Okay, now we will proceed. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1022.
House Bill 1022, Representative Landgraf, also Senator Newell, concerning alignment of the duration of the Child Care Authorization Notice with the Child Care Assistance eligibility period for children participating in the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1022 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1022 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Rosenthal and Schaefer. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1022 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1021.
House Bill 1021, Representatives Mitch Bush and Hamner, also Senator Schwartz, concerning the penalty for violating a road restriction for vehicle combinations over 35 feet in length traveling on Independence Pass.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1021 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1021 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 41 aye votes, 23 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1021 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1232.
House Bill 1232, Representative Duran, also Senator Stebbins, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Agriculture.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1232 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1232 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Pabon. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1232 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1233.
House Bill 1233, Representative Duran, also Senator Stebbins, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Corrections.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1233 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1233 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Conti and McLaughlin. Close the machine. With 41 aye votes, 23 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1233 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1234.
House Bill 1234, Representative Duran, also Senator Stebbins, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Education.
Representative Duran. I'm totally just out of it today. Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1234 on third reading and final passage.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader. The question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1234 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives McNulty and Swam. Close the machine. With 60 aye votes, 4 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1234 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1235.
House Bill 1235 by Representative Duran, also Senator Stedman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the offices of the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and State Planning and Budgeting.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1235 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1235 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 38 aye votes, 26 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1235 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1236.
House Bill 1236 by Representative Duran, also Senator Stedman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1236 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1236 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck, Janal, Priola. Close the machine. With 44 aye votes, 20 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1236 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1237.
House Bill 1237, Representative Duran, also Senator Stedman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Higher Education.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1237 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1237 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1237 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1238.
House Bill 1238, by Representative Duran, also Senator Stedman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Human Services.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1238 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1238 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representative Szabo. Close the machine. With 56 aye votes, 8 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1238 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1239.
House Bill 1239 by Representative Duran, also Senator Stedman, concerning a supplemental appropriation to the Judicial Department.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1239 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1239 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representative Conti and Scott. Close the machine. With 47 aye votes, 17 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1239 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1240.
House Bill 1240 by Representative Duran, also Senator Stedman, concerning a supplemental appropriation to the Department of Law.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1240 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1240 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Giroux, Lawrence, Murray. Close the machine with 39 aye votes, 25 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1240 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1241.
House Bill 1241, Representative Duran, also Senator Steadman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Local Affairs.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1241 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1241 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine with 47 aye votes, 17 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1241 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1242.
House Bill 1242, Representative Duran, also Senator Steadman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Natural Resources.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1242 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1242 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine with 59 aye votes, 5 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1242 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1243.
House Bill 1243, Representative Duran, also Senator Steadman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Personnel and Administration.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1243 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1243 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Becker. Close the machine with 43 aye votes, 21 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1243 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1244.
House Bill 1244, Representative Duran, also Senator Steadman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Public Health and Environment.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1244 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1244 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine with 38 aye votes, 26 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1244 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1245.
House Bill 1245, Representative Duran, also Senator Steadman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Public Safety.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1245 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1245 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck, McNulty, Singer. Close the machine with 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1245 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1246.
House Bill 1246, Representative Duran, also Senator Steadman, concerning a supplemental appropriation of the Department of Revenue.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1246 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1246 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Navarro. Close the machine with 44 aye votes, 20 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1246 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Cole, will please read the title of House Bill 1247.
House Bill 1247, Representative Duran, all Senator Stedman, concerning a supplemental appropriation to the Department of State.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1247 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1247 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Cole, will please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Foote, McNulty, Lawrence, Wright. Close the machine with 62 aye votes, 2 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1247 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Cole, please read the title of House Bill 1248.
House Bill 1248, Representative Duran, all Senator Stedman, concerning a supplemental appropriation to the Department of the Treasury.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1248 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1248 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Cole, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Pabon. Close the machine with 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1248 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Cole, please read the title of House Bill 1249.
House Bill 1249, Representative Duran, all Senator Stedman, concerning funding for capital construction, making supplemental appropriations in connection therewith.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1249 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1249 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Cole, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Swam. Close the machine with 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1249 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Cole, please read the title of House Bill 1250.
House Bill 1250, Representative Mayo, Senator Stedman, concerning authorizing payments from the Contingency Reserve Fund of the 2013-14 budget year for school districts that are in significant financial need due to unanticipated events occurring in the 2013-14 budget year in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Kohler. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1250 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1250 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Cole, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives, close the machine. 64 with 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1250 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Cole, please read the title of House Bill 1251.
House Bill 1251, Representative May, also Senator Stedman, concerning adjustments in the amount of total program funding for public schools for the 2013-14 budget year in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1251 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1251 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative May. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1251 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1252.
House Bill 1252, Representatives May and Giroux, all Senator Hodge, concerning funding for system capacity changes related to intellectual and developmental disabilities waiver services in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1252 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1252 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative, close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1252 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1103.
House Bill 1103 by Representative Pabon, also Senator Harvey, concerning the criteria that certain securities must meet to qualify as legal investments for public funds.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1103 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1103 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Del Grosso, close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1103 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1008.
House Bill 1008 by Representative Hamner, also Senator Schwartz, concerning the authorization of the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority to make loans to private entities for purposes of forest health projects.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1008 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 1008 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Gardner, Priola. Close the machine. With 51 aye votes, 13 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1008 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1018.
House Bill 1018 by Representative Hamner, also Senator Stebbins, concerning the requirement that the Department of Revenue prepare a tax profile and expenditure report every 2 years.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1018 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1018 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Conti, Navarro, Pabon. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1018 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1112.
House Bill 1112 by Representative Lebstock, also Senator Ulibarri, concerning limited authorization for county clerk and recorder to redact the first 5 digits of the social security number from public document recorded with the clerk and recorder at the request of the individual to whom the social security number is assigned.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1112 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1112 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Dorr, Schaefer, close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1112 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1129.
House Bill 1129 by Representative Lebstock, also Senator Hodge, concerning the submission by a state agency to a local government of information related to an application to local government to approve a major utility facility.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1129 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1129 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Everett, Sane. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1129 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1130.
House Bill 1130 by Representative McCann, also Senator Ulibarri, concerning the disposition of monies charged to borrowers for costs to be paid in connection with foreclosure.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1130 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1130 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1130 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. We'll go now to announcements, introductions for our tribute to CSU. Representative Fisher and Janal, who's going first. Representative Janal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and welcome Colorado State University. If you'd please rise and all of us give a hand to Colorado State University campus, both. I am proud to be an alumni of this great institution, and I received my doctorate from the College of Veterinary Medicine from Colorado State University, I want to say several years ago, but I look back and it's many years ago. In fact, all of my degrees came from land-grant colleges, my bachelor's, my master's, as well as my doctorate. So I am a true product of land-grant universities. And during the 144 years now that we're celebrating, since its founding, CSU has evolved into one of the nation's premier research universities while remaining true to its land-grant roots. CSU's campuses and their facilities, faculty, students, and alumni comprise a powerful economic force that generates an estimated $5 million statewide in economic activity. True to its land-grant mission, CSU excels in the area of workforce education. The university brings in annual research funding exceeding $400 million and has created startup businesses employing more than 2,500 Coloradans. I am privileged as a state legislator to represent and to honor Colorado State University on the 144th anniversary of its founding. Happy birthday, CSU.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's my honor and privilege today to present Colorado State University with the Joint House tribute, and it reads as follows. On February 11, 2014, Colorado State University celebrates 144 years of providing life-changing educational experiences to nearly 180,000 living graduates. CSU is Colorado's only land-grant university, and it's consistently ranked among the top public universities in the United States in terms of educational quality and affordability. CSU stands as one of the nation's premier research universities, maintaining world-leading programs in fields such as veterinary medicine, natural resources, agricultural sciences, and engineering. Today, CSU is the university of choice of Colorado high school students, with more resident high school graduates who choose to attend CSU over any other campus in the state. And the university continues to have a strong track record of access, affordability, and success for all whom it serves. Additionally, CSU is the foundation of the CSU system, which includes CSU Pueblo, one of the only 2 federally designated Hispanic-serving institutions in the state, and the 100% online CSU Global Campus. Today, we congratulate Colorado State University on its 144 years of outstanding work in education, research, and service, and wish CSU and CSU system continued success. On request of Representatives Randy Fisher and Joanne Janal and Senator John Kafalis, this 11th day of February 2014. So I'd also like to just, if I could, introduce individually the members and the dignitaries of CSU that we have here with us today. We have System Chancellor Michael Martin, CSU President Tony Frank, CSU Global President Becky Takeda Tinker, CSU Pueblo President Leslie DeMar, Chair of the CSU System Board of Governors Dorothy Harrell, Craig Beiruti, Dean of the College of Agricultural Sciences. Carl Wright, Provost for the CSU Pueblo. Ron Saga, Engineering Lead for CSU Denver South. And of course, it's my pleasure to introduce Cam the Ram, CSU mascot. And Goldie the Eagle, CSU Global mascot.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And at this time, if you would indulge us,
Could we actually, I think there's a couple other members who'd like to say something, and then we could hear from the choir.
Okay, very good.
Representative Navarro.
I just want to personally thank CSU Pueblo for coming to the House today. Welcome, and I hope you have a great day.
Representative Fields. Madam Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone. I just want to say congratulations to Colorado State University for 144 years of touching lives and shaping the character of so many students. I'm proud to talk about CSU because my son and my daughter both are graduates from CSU. And what I know about their experience is that CSU is committed to student success. That much I know for sure is because my son was a part of the Key Club community. In fact, he was one of the first students that participated in Key Plus. And for those of you who do not know about Key Community, basically it's an opportunity where students are kind of pulled together and they're given a lot of support to make sure that they matriculate through college. And I just want to thank you for all that you do and all the success that you provide to students across our state and our nation. Thank you so very much, and congratulations on 144 years.
Representative Diane Mitch-Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you and happy birthday, CSU. As a former tenured faculty member, I know that CSU does indeed always put student success first. But moreover, it is our only land-grant university, and its teaching, research, and service that are the beacons for CSU, and they're what the faculty, the staff, and the students are all dedicated to. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of the most important parts of CSU, especially for our rural counties, and that's CSU Ag Extension. I work closely with our Ag Extension agents, and they provide all kinds of wonderful research data, nitty-gritty, common sense information to our kids and to our counties. So thank you for everything you do, CSU.
Representative Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I owe a special debt to CSU because they graduated my son a couple years ago, and that graduation has put him and his classmates on a career that's really a plus and a positive. He graduated from forestry and is now actually in northern Idaho working for the Division of Wild and Game up there tracking carnivores during the winter time. He's one of his friends who he's back in Fort Collins visiting with today is an engineer at Tesla Motors, engineering the user experience. Another one of his classmates is now a doctor of osteopathic medicine. So CSU, great job for launching young people on terrific careers. Well done. Thank you.
Representative Fisher. Now we can hear from the choir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce the CSU Concert Choir. They're an addition to an ensemble that consists of 40 undergraduate and graduate students from a variety of majors at Colorado State University. The concert choir performs advanced choral music from all historical eras, regularly premieres new music in the state, and in keeping with CSU's mission as a land-grant institution, travels around the state of Colorado on annual tours as outreach to high school and middle school students and teachers. The concert choir is conducted by Dr. Ryan Olson, Assistant Professor of Choral Music and Education at CSU. Today, the choir will perform a Song of Joys by Nicholas, I'm not going to pronounce that name, featuring a text that is adapted from the great American poet Walt Whitman. So please enjoy the choir.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, thank you for your attention today. I really appreciate your taking a moment out of your busy day today to celebrate CSU. Thank you.
Representative Janal.
And happy birthday, CSU. Thanks for being here.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask that the Speaker make sure the doors are locked and we hear one more number before they leave.
If they're up for it, we'd be happy to hear one more.
I'm gonna sing till the Spirit moves in my heart. I'm gonna sing till the Spirit moves in my heart. I'm gonna sing till the Spirit moves in my heart. I'm gonna sing till Jesus comes. I'm gonna sing till my Jesus moves in my heart. I'm gonna sing till my Jesus moves in my heart. I'm gonna sing till my Jesus moves in my heart. I'm gonna sing till Jesus till He comes. I'm gonna sing till my Jesus moves in my Jesus, oh 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 my Jesus, till He comes. It was great, that He, I know, it was great, that He, I know, it was great, that He, I know, it was grace that will lead me home. Hallelujah, I'm gonna praise my Jesus, oh my Jesus, I'm praising my Jesus. Oh my Jesus, I praise my Jesus. Oh Jesus, oh Jesus, can't you feel the Spirit move? Can't you feel it move? Can't you feel it move? Can't you feel it move? I'm gonna shout, oh my Jesus, 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 till he comes. Shout, oh my Jesus, 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 till he comes. I'm gonna sing till my Jesus.
Thank you to the choir. You're welcome back any day you want. We're always happy to hear your voices. We will proceed to our next order of business, second reading of bills, general orders. Representative Becker. You've heard the motion. Seeing no objection, the House will resolve itself in the committee of the whole for consideration of general orders. Representative Becker will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading a bill at length. Committee amendments will not be read unless requested as they are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and not read unless requested. Bills will be laid over upon motion of the majority leader. The coat rule is relaxed. Yeah, I just need the... Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1065.
House Bill 1065, Representative Moreno, also Senator Hodge, concerning limits on indemnification provisions in motor carrier transportation contracts.
Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1065 and the committee report from Transportation and Energy.
To the committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Transportation Committee made some pretty technical amendments, just better defining what a contract actually is, and then also when the bill would take effect. As the bill was originally written, it would go into effect immediately and affect current contracts, but in the committee we passed an amendment to say that the provisions of this bill would take effect whenever a contract is renegotiated or renewed. Ask for an aye vote on the committee report.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the Transportation and Energy Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The Transportation and Energy Committee report passes. To Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, it's a pleasure to bring to you this morning House Bill 1065. And at its core, House Bill 1065 is a fairness issue. Right now, there are small businesses, small trucking companies in Colorado, many of which are in my district, that there is not an equal playing field between them and the facility operators that they deliver to or pick up products from. Right now, we have situations in Colorado where there are contracts with these facility operators that require the truckers to be liable for anything that happens on their property, even if it's not the trucking company's fault. That's not fair, and that's not equal. To demonstrate a piece of this, I actually have a sample contract that truckers are required to sign on to with facility operators. And here's just a little bit of the language, members. The language says, this indemnity shall apply whether or not the facility operator were or claimed to be passively, concurrently, or actively negligent. It is not fair for these companies to have to accept all liability and accept the negligence of another company. So with that, members, I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Assistant Majority Leader Pabon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank my good friend, Representative Moreno, for his willingness to start this conversation and this dialogue about what the right public policy is with respect to indemnification agreements. And as many of you know, and as you've looked at this bill and looked at other parts of the statute, it's a rare occasion when the General Assembly steps into a private contracting situation. So what we have at its core, as Representative Moreno said, is two private parties contracting for liability. Now, for those of you who've had the pleasure of looking through one of these contracts, as Representative Moreno has and several else of us have, we know that there is much more than just this indemnification clause in these agreements. There's limitations of liability. Of course, the contracts themselves have prices and times and delivery hours, as well as access components. There are so many different parts of these contracts. And we really, as a public policy, when we look at these contracts, we generally say to the private parties, we will let you decide and dictate the terms of these agreements, because you're better equipped to know and how to assess the risks and responsibilities associated with these agreements. So the legislature very rarely is involved in these private contracts, which is what the core of the bill does. It says that it will be the contract provision will be void as against public policy, which means it's essentially non-enforceable. So if we are going to go there, the question that you have to ask yourself is what is fair, not in light of this specific provision, but in light of the contract as a whole. And with that, I would introduce and ask to be displayed. I'd move L003 and ask it to be displayed.
The amendment is properly before us. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What this amendment says is it substitutes the word own and it interjects sole. As Representative Singer would call this, the sole amendment. It is an amendment that recognizes that there are lots of different variables in a contract, and that as a matter of public policy, as Representative Moreno has mentioned, there is some recognition that you should not be liable for another person's negligence. And that's what this amendment does. It says if the supplier, the fuel supplier, the non-trucking company has 0% liability, 0%, and the other party has 100% liability, this says that the trucking company could not be liable for that negligence. And Representative Moreno and I and the motor carriers and the Colorado Petroleum Association and I have all sat down together trying to figure out what a fair compromise is with this bill. And we have not been able to come to agreement with the stakeholders, and in fact, Representative Moreno will no doubt ask for a no vote. And I respect that because he's taken on this bill on behalf of the folks who are indemnifying the other party. But as a matter of public policy, when we start to wade into these private contracts, we really need to be careful and tread lightly. And that's what this amendment does. So it says, if the other party, the non-motor carrier, is 100% liable, this indemnification agreement will not hold. I ask for an aye vote and appreciate again Representative Moreno's willingness to have the conversation and dialogue, as well as all the stakeholders. Even though we weren't able to come to a full agreement, I think this is the best compromise on this bill.
Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, I really actually have to thank Representative Pabon for coming to the table and trying to figure out a compromise and getting, Representative Pabon and I got the stakeholders together and we really tried to hash out a compromise. Unfortunately, we couldn't get there. And Representative Pabon, while I appreciate you offering this amendment as a step in the right direction, it's still not a true compromise. Because in reality, although members, it may seem innocuous to change just one word, what this does in practice is completely disregard any shared liability or shared negligence between the truckers and the facility operator. So although a facility operator may be 99% negligent for their actions, the trucker still indemnifies that facility operator completely. There is no shared negligence, there is no shared liability when both parties are at fault with this amendment. And for that reason, I ask for a no vote.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Pabon, if you could answer the question for me on a hypothetical situation in which I pull my truck into a plant and say I'm parked 18 inches away from the curb instead of 12 inches as may be required, and then the forklift and the forklift driver damage my truck, hit my truck into the side, there could be potential that I might be at least somewhat responsible since I'm 6 inches outside of where I should have legally parked that semi. Would that nullify this scenario? Would that nullify the bill, and would that force me then to pay the damages on the forklift from him hitting my truck?
Representative Pabon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, let's be clear about who will be liable and who will actually pay the claim, because what we require and what's required under these contracts is an insurance agreement, so that if there is liability that's incurred, the insurance company is required to pay for this damage. What you have to recognize is that, and again, this provision is not in a vacuum. So if there is liability on behalf of the trucking company for this additional negligence, that's going to be reflected in the insurance requirements as placed into the contract. That could be reflected in the limitations of liability that could be placed in the contract. That could be reflected in the price of the contract, the access hours. It's not solely this provision that is going to set that liability over the course of between the parties. And so since that's the case, and if there is liability, which under this amendment there would still be liability, so I'll concede to that. But you have to ask yourself, what does the rest of the contract say to address that situation? Because we can come up with hypotheticals all day long about comparative negligence about someone's 50% responsible and the other person's 50% responsible. But we have to look at the contract as a whole to make sure that that liability is proportionate. And if the cost of the contract goes up because the liability is not distributed according to this bill, then that may be a consequence of passing either this bill or failing to pass this amendment.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you. And I guess that brings my question and why I have heartburn with the amendment. You know, I used to have a small trucking company, grand total of 3 trucks. And we used to haul fertilizer out here, the old site east of Denver that's now a wildlife refuge. And at one point, we had that issue brought up, and the insurance requirement, the bond and the indemnity requirement for me as a trucking company with 3 trucks was prohibitive. The only people then that could do business with them were the giant trucking firms, and eliminated the small guys out. And I think that is part of the problem that I've had heartburn with those contracts, and I'm not one to usually weigh in on contract issues as between 2 people. But I also understand the other side of that, where it eliminated people like me from being able to do business. And so with that, I would urge a no vote on the amendment, but thank you.
Representative Kagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would urge a yes vote on the amendment. I think it does address the main concern that we heard from the motor carriers, which was that we might have nothing to do with the accident and still be held liable. And this amendment does make clear that if you have nothing to do with the accident whatsoever, you did everything right, you cannot be held liable. If the sole mistake was solely on the depot or the non-carrier party, motor carrier party, then you are in the clear. But it does preserve the right for the parties to the contract to apportion the risk as they see fit, adjust the price accordingly, get insured accordingly, and it allows that, but it does not allow a completely blameless motor carrier to carry the liability burden. So I think this is a good amendment and makes this bill a better bill, and I would urge a yes vote on the amendment.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to call everyone's attention who believes that we disagree with everybody on the other side of the aisle all the time. My friend and colleague, Chairman Kagan of the Distinguished Judiciary Committee, is absolutely correct. This is a good amendment. It accomplishes what I have heard for several years motor carriers wish to accomplish, which is to not have to indemnify for their own sole liability. So this amendment, by saying, moving from own and saying sole liability, makes it very clear that that is what we're doing. It will, I believe, limit litigation on these matters, make it clear that motor carriers are not going to be held liable in instances where they have no liability whatsoever. And for that reason, I would ask all of my colleagues in the House to support this amendment.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Everett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I urge a yes vote on this amendment. This just makes this bill a little bit more palatable to all the stakeholders, so I urge a yes vote.
Representative Priola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I urge a no vote on this amendment, a yes on the bill. I applaud Representative Moreno for bringing this bill. Him and I live in the same part of Adams County. We're very familiar with what happens to folks in the trucking industry vis-a-vis certain components, other industrial players, so on and so forth. We have a situation in this state that's unique. A refinery that was built long ago and is one of the few refineries in the region has and wields a certain level of influence, if you will, not of their own making, but as most would want to do in their own business practice, wherever they can shift costs onto their suppliers or so on and so forth, they would try it. This bill helps ensure that the trucking industry can insure for what they're responsible for, not what someone else might do at another time in another place. This amendment waters down the bill and doesn't accomplish what the bill is intended to do, which, I might add, is already done in around 40 other states in the United States. Similar bill to the House Bill 1065 passed in Wyoming. They have a long tradition of oil and gas and refining. So again, keep in mind, this is not a sea change in contract law. This same measure has passed in around 40 states across the country. This amendment waters down the bill. I ask for a no vote on the amendment.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm asking for a no vote on this amendment. If a court were to sit here and take a look at this bill the way it stands right now, a court can certainly figure out what the legislative intent is by the wording resulting from its own negligence, meaning that the court will take a look at a motor carrier and the property owner's own negligence. When you substitute the word own for sole, it becomes a little bit more dicey for the court. Well, what does that mean precisely? What does sole negligence mean? Does that mean 100% of your negligence? Does that mean that there is no comparative negligence? Does that mean that in order for the property owner to be liable, that it's only their negligence in the matter? I think that one word alone is going to cause some strife within the courts and within court rulings, whereas own negligence is pretty clear on its face. I would ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Representative McCann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would also ask for a no vote on this amendment. I think the term own is consistent with our current comparative negligence law, and that it will be interpreted to mean that you can only ask someone to indemnify against their own negligence, but not sole negligence. We want to keep the concept of comparative negligence applicable. So I would ask for a no vote on this amendment.
There will be a division, so we'll see. Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I'll ask colleagues for a no vote on this amendment. Representative McCann is correct. This language around own is consistent with our current statute. We have a statute on limitations on indemnification against public entities, and the language there is own. It is not sole. And again, this would continue the unfair business practice of having truckers be responsible for the liability of someone else. And I would ask for a no vote.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Pabon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, the issue with the bill as a whole and why this amendment makes the bill palatable is because this is a bit of the camel's nose getting under the tent with this bill. Today, it's the trucking companies that's coming to ask us to let them out of what they perceive as an unfair contract. Who's it going to be tomorrow and the next day and the next session after that? We don't wade into these private contracting agreements except in rare occasions. And the one rare occasion is when you're talking about a public entity. So an institution of higher education, the Colorado legislature. And that's a public policy reason why we stepped into that piece. That's a public contract with a private entity. That's why there's that distinction here. This is weighing directly at the core of the right to contract and for the parties to decide whether or not they want to enter into that contract. Representative Sonnenberg's example of saying, well, if you require these indemnification agreements, our insurance is going to cost too much and we're not going to be able to work in that field. If that's the role of the legislature is to define who's participating in what job market or who's participating in what contract, we're going to be here every day, 24 hours a day, for 120 days every session after this, if that's where our focus has suddenly become. So it's less about the shared liability in this one instance. It's less about this particular indemnification agreement. It's about what we're setting as precedent in the legislature dictating and defining who can participate in an industry, who can't. If we find that it's too expensive for a particular entrant into a market, that we're suddenly going to lower those costs, it just opens a door that once it's open can't be closed. And it's a strange argument that you might hear from me on this point, but this is very much about free market, private contracting principles in place. I would hope that my friends on both sides of the aisle can appreciate this view and support this amendment. With that, I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the question before us, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L003. A division has been requested. All those in the chamber not entitled to vote, please be seated. Not yet. Could everyone please be seated unless you're entitled to vote? All those in favor of Amendment L003, please stand and remain standing in one place until the count is taken.
I'm doing this for the scarf dam. Let me stand and you can need a counter.
Marilyn, do you want to announce that? Okay. You may be seated. All those opposed, please stand and remain standing in one place until the count is taken.
Yeah, we need to take a picture of this.
Okay, so the amendment passes. You may be seated. L003 is passed. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Representative Pabon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with that amendment, I ask for a no vote. I'm just kidding. I ask for an aye vote. And again, appreciate Representative Moreno and all the stakeholders working on this. And I also, just a point of reflection on the vote count and the folks standing and for various reasons and why. It's a powerful statement, I think, to, this is a bipartisan issue. You can philosophical issue, and you looked at these folks standing and supporting or not. It was kind of a neat process. It's democracy at its finest. So, ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1065? Brief recess. The committee is now in order. Madam Chair, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1065, one bill.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, House Bill 1065 will be laid over as requested by the Majority Leader. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also move to lay over House Bill 1110 and Senate Bill 19 to the end of the calendar.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, House Bill 1110 and Senate Bill 19 will be laid over as requested by the Majority Leader. Okay. Madam Majority Leader. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also move that the House lay over House Bill 1030 and House Bill 1080 to the end of the calendar.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, House Bill 1030 and House Bill 1080 will be laid over as requested by the Majority Leader. Representative Schaefer. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1117. House Bill 1099.
House Bill 1099 by Representative Schaefer, also Senator Aguilar, concerning prescription drugs and the practice of optometry.
Representative Schaefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1099 and the Health, Insurance, and Environment Committee report.
Thank you, Representative Schaefer. To the committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee report clarified that this prescriptive authority for optometrists only applies to hydrocodone combination drugs, not to stronger narcotic hydrocodone drugs. So I move the committee report.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the committee report. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The committee report passes. To the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this bill came out of committee on a unanimous vote. The bill will allow Colorado optometrists to continue prescribing hydrocodone combination drugs, which are classified under Schedule 3, but may be reclassified under Schedule 2, which could be mid-year of 2014. These hydrocodone combination drugs are needed for relieving eye pain from a foreign particle in the eye, an abrasion, an eye ulcer, or an eye infection. In the committee, the Department of Regulatory Agencies did express some questions about how DORA could regulate optometrists with this limited Schedule II authority. And the Colorado optometrists and I are committed to work through this question with the Department of Regulatory Agencies. Over the last 18 years, Colorado optometrists have not abused this prescription authority under Schedule III, and there is no reason to believe that our optometrists would abuse this authority if and when they were reclassified to Schedule II. So the bill is going to allow our Colorado patients, our constituents with an eye injury, to receive immediate relief with a prescription from a local optometrist. And with that, I ask for your support for House Bill 1099, as amended.
Representative Kraft-Tharp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I ask for a yes vote on this bill. This summer I met with someone in my district, an optometrist from Kaiser, who explained to me that there's new technologies coming. I personally find it scary technologies, but there's new technologies coming where you can wear contacts, and the contacts will have medicine in it to help regulate your diabetes. We're entering in a new age of technology, but Colorado needs this law in order to be able to move forward with this new medical technology. I urge an aye vote. Thank you, Representative Schaefer, for bringing this bill.
Representative Landgraf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill is a good bill. It really is about patient access. All it does is allow people to get their meds from their doctor when they're prescribed, saving the extra trip to the pharmacist. And personally, I think that's just a great idea. I would ask for a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1099. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. House Bill 1099 passes. $11.17. Oh. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1065.
House Bill 1065, Representative Moreno, also Senator Hodge, concerning limits on indemnification provisions and motor carrier transportation contracts. She laid it over one bill.
Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Although the amendment that is now with the bill was not ideal, I do ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1065? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1065. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. House Bill 1065 passes. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
I've heard the motion. The committee will rise and report. Seeing no objection, the committee will rise and report.
The House will come back to order. Mr. Kohler, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, Committee of the Whole begs leave to report as under consideration the following attached bills being second reading thereof and makes the following recommendations thereon. House Bills 1065 amended, 1099 amended, passed on second reading and order gross placed on the calendar for third reading final passage.
Representative Becker. You've heard the motion. There is an amendment at the desk. Mr. Kohler, please read the Moreno amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Representative Moreno moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole diversity action taken by the committee in adopting the following Pabon Amendment L003 to House Bill 1065 to show that said amendment lost and that House Bill 1065 as amended passed.
Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the Moreno Cow Amendment.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this would strip the Pabon Amendment that is now on the bill. Again, members, this may seem like an innocuous issue. Changing one word, what harm could it do? But in reality, it is a big difference. In reality, there is no comparative negligence under the amendment that we adopted. And comparative negligence is our standard in Colorado statute right now. So this amendment, as it is now, would still require truckers to indemnify facility operators, even if those facility operators are 99% negligent. All we're asking for is everyone take responsibility and liability for their own actions. I ask for an aye vote.
Representative Priola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I ask for an aye vote on the Pabon Amendment. This bill, before amended, is about personal responsibility. I'm sorry. For the Moreno Amendment, I ask for a yes on the Moreno Amendment that strips off the Pabon Amendment. So,
Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I know many of you probably weren't listening to the discussion earlier. The issue here is whether or not you want to cut the little guys that can't afford the indemnity policy that's required to enable them to cover 100% of the damage caused by even somebody else's negligence, not their own. This amendment, what this amendment does is undoes the Pabon Amendment, which basically guts the bill. And if you want to gut the bill and vote against the bill, I understand that completely. Then do that. But let's not do it by putting a poison pill on the amendment or on the bill. If you want to do it, kill the bill tomorrow on third reading. The fact of the matter is, this is a bill that helps small trucking companies like I had, that I could no longer do business because I couldn't do the insurance. I couldn't afford the indemnity. With this amendment, if we do not undo the Pabon Amendment, what happens is we create a monopoly for only a small handful of companies to be able to do business under those contracts. So I would ask for a yes vote.
Representative, who's next? Gardner. Someone speak. Otherwise, we're going to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Representative Sonnenberg, I would think that a farmer like yourself would make the kind of impassioned plea for this amendment that you did. But I respectfully disagree that it makes the bill useless. I've seen this bill in some form at least 4 times over the past 8 years. And forever the complaint has been from carriers that under current contractual practices between private contracting parties, they end up being liable when they did absolutely nothing wrong. And if that is the case, and that is what has been complained of most frequently to me, then the bill with the amendment will address that problem. But if that is not really the case, if what carriers are trying to do, and I don't think it's immoral, I don't think it's unethical, this is a business kind of relationship between the carriers and the various yards that they visit. What the bill would do without the amendment that Representative Moreno is asking to strip off, is really throw the gates, I won't say floodgates, that's too hyperbolic, just throw the gates of litigation open every time one of these things occurs. Every time there's an accident on a yard, one party's going to go after the other. The insurance companies are going to be involved. Everybody's lawyer is going to get to the courthouse, and there's going to be a fight. These indemnity provisions that this bill seeks to prohibit, to declare contrary to the public policy and therefore void, in other words, we're going to make a particular kind of voluntary contractual deal void, what they do is allow certain business certainties. The amendment keeps this bill very narrow to do what, again, I have heard complained of over and over again, without throwing open more litigation, more uncertainty. Yes, does it swing the balance if we leave things as they are? Yes, but the as they are is the common law. The as they are is what has always been the law and what is the status quo. We will be injecting ourselves into a private contractual relationship otherwise. And even with the amendment, we will do so in a very narrow way. But I think that very narrow way is acceptable and appropriate. And for that reason, I ask for a no vote on the Moreno-Cow amendment. Thank you.
Representative Kagan.
I also ask for a no vote on the Moreno amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole members. The question is, do we allow motor carriers and fueling depots to come to their own agreement as to how much they charge, when they give access to the area, and who bears the risk when something goes wrong? You may disagree with the apportionment of the risk, the way the contracting parties have arranged it. You may declare it against the public policy of the state of Colorado, but these are the private contractual arrangements that the motor carriers are making with the depots. They are apportioning the risk. They are deciding what times the motor carriers can come. They're saying, this is the price that we will charge you. And all those other arrangements within these contracts are made in light of the apportionment of the risk. The price is set in accordance with the apportionment of the risk. The insurance requirements of the carriers and the depots are determined in accordance with the apportionment of the risk. These are the private contractual arrangements that these motor carriers are making with the depots. We have the power to say, you may not reach these contractual arrangements, but whether we should exercise that power is the question that we're brought here to answer today. This amendment, with the Pabon amendment to the bill, it says if you have no fault whatsoever, no, you cannot be held responsible. But as long as there is any measure of shared responsibility for the accident, for the damage, then we have decided as contracting parties that that will be borne by and insured against by the carrier. Prices are set accordingly, access is set accordingly, insurance rates are set accordingly, and it is not appropriate, I would suggest, to interfere as a matter of public policy with those arrangements, and therefore I would urge a no vote on the Moreno amendment.
Representative McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would urge a yes vote on the Moreno amendment. So this is like the battle of the lawyers up here, I guess. But so here's the problem. As Representative Sonnenberg pointed out, the truckers often do not have the leverage or the power to negotiate a fair contract because of their situation vis-a-vis the facilities. So we, as a state, in the past have found that certain kinds of contracts are unconscionable for that reason or against public policy. So what the Moreno Amendment is saying is that it's not fair to tell a trucking company that they have to indemnify the owner of the facility or the depot against negligence that the owner of the facility or the depot actually has caused. And what the bill originally said is you can only contract if you say we will hold each party responsible for their own negligence. So if it is shared negligence, then under the original bill without the amendment, the court will find who is negligent and to what degree. What the amendment does is say it's only if it's solely the negligence of the depot, then you can contract, you can get insurance to cover that and be indemnified. So I think it's a matter of fairness in contracting in these situations. So I would suggest that we support Representative Moreno's amendment in order to provide a level of fairness for the contracting parties so that each party is then responsible for their own negligence and they don't have to indemnify against someone else's negligence and consequently have to pay a lot more for insurance. And as Representative Sonnenberg said, it can mean that some smaller companies can't provide the service because they can't afford the insurance. So I would urge a yes vote on the Moreno amendment.
Representative Pabon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I ran this amendment for two reasons, and I oppose this amendment to the cow for those same two reasons. The first amendment, or the first reason is this. So without using the term indemnification, indemnify, all those lawyer words, let's just say that we're going to change and disallow this part of the contract. And the truckers or the motor carriers are okay with that. But what if suddenly the price goes up? Or what if suddenly the insurance costs go up? Are they coming back to us then in the next bill or the next legislation to say, well, thank you for changing that part of our contract, but we need these other changes in order to engage in the marketplace? And I think that is probably the wrong place as a matter of public policy for the legislature to be in. The other reason I brought this amendment to this body's attention is because, yes, we do have a shared negligence scenario, but the beginning provision of the statute that shares that negligence says, absent a contractual provision otherwise. The core of what I mean by those words is if private parties decide to change this allocation of responsibility and risk, we want them to do that. We encourage them to do that because that gives businesses the ability to plan and predict and analyze their cost of doing business. That's the entire premise behind why the legislature does not get involved in these private contractual arrangements. But if we are going to get involved, and this amendment allows us to get involved, not completely, but enough, one thing you have to remember is the only time a other party or a fuel shipper, or the grounds or the yards or whoever we're talking about that the truckers go on. The only time this provision is going to be implicated is when there is some liability, some negligence by the truckers. There will have to be some bad act or omission or negligent activity taken by the truckers. So it's not like no one is responsible, and it's not like the trucking companies aren't responsible. They will have some negligent activity. And the question you have to ask yourself is the status quo where we assign liability, we set insurance requirements, we set access requirements. So as an example, if we want to make sure that the trucking company is fully supervised all the time, you might say, well, you're only allowed to deliver between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. as a result of this provision. What if the trucking company, because of their way of doing business, has a 24-hour delivery system? That probably makes sense, actually, in this industry. And now suddenly those access hours are changed. Is the trucking company going to come back to us and say, hey, they limited our access. We can't do business the way we did. And so the issue here is the slippery slope in trying to engage in these private contractual disputes and deciding that we know better than the parties who are making these business arrangements. I ask for a no vote on the Moreno amendment.
Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, to bring this discussion to a close, I won't belabor the point. The reality is that all we're asking for is for people to take responsibility for their own actions. And Pabone's amendment, the Pabone amendment, doesn't allow for that. It still says that the cost of insurance, the cost of doing business, have to be borne by one company, usually the smaller company, the truckers. So I ask for your support for this amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the House is the adoption of the Moreno amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 33 aye votes, 31 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the Moreno amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. There are no further amendments. The question before the House is the adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Lee and McCann. Representative McCann. Close the machine. With 64 aye votes, 0 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Announcements and introductions. Seeing none, Madam Majority Leader. Oh, Representative McNulty.
Mr. Speaker, I ask to be excused for some portion of the afternoon next Monday and for the entire day. On Friday, I have spoken with the Assistant Minority Leader and the Majority Leader.
Representative McNulty will be excused as requested. Madam Majority Leader, any other announcements? Representative Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Republicans, don't forget that we do have a caucus lunch today down in room 111 at noon.
Representative Schaefer.
Mr. Speaker, I ask to be excused at 1:30 today. I've spoken with the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader.
Representative Schaefer will be excused as requested. Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was remiss in seeing this on my desk, but we had a group from my district, from Stargate, the Stargate School. It's a school for gifted and talented. And Mr. Speaker, they were so gifted and talented, they decided to leave before that really long debate on own and soul. So please, let's welcome them even though they're not here.
Representative Kagan.
we have in the chamber, or certainly in the General Assembly somewhere, in the Capitol somewhere, the good people from Alternative Support. This is an organization, a facility that helps those with disabilities to get along, and we welcome you, if you are listening, to the Capitol, and thank you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you around. Welcome to Alternative Support. I think this is they coming in right now. Welcome.
Okay. Any other announcements or directions? No, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 1 p.m. this afternoon, at which point we will adjourn until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess till 1 p.m. today.